Good evening, everyone. So today I'll be presenting on evaluating the built heritage of northern post-armed conflict zones of Sri Lanka, which is a chapter from my dissertation for MSc in Architectural Conservation at the University of Edinburgh, which was on an overview on the challenges encountered in formulating and integrating a post-war built heritage conservation plan. So I picked this chapter to present today because this chapter provides the basis or emphasizes the need for a post-conflict conservation plan. So why is built heritage important? Because it is a substantial evidence and a significant cultural asset that in its layers reveals the history. So in Sri Lanka, where most of our history is based on the literature and mythology, I think it is very important that we start focusing on having an evidence-based history. So saying that, in Sri Lanka, the only law that is available to conserve such built heritage is the Antiquities Ordinance number 9 of 1940, which in its definition of archaeological monument does not address or cover every vital built heritage. Its definition mainly focuses on the archaeological monuments and leaves out most of the very important built heritage. And also, with reference to the list of protected monuments that are listed, we could also see that there is an age restriction for buildings. So a building has to be 100 years old in order to be listed. And that is why most of the important buildings are left out. And focusing on the northern province where we have had the armed conflict, early archaeological sequence is less clarified, though there are pioneering textual and field surveys that have been conducted by our scholars, but then later that was not further developed due to less restrictions of access. And in reality, the declaration process that is defined in the ordinance is not very clear in order to identify the built heritage. And therefore, this paper aims to record and evaluate the built heritage in the northern post-armed conflict zone with objectives of identifying the laws and policies in Sri Lanka regarding this matter and identifying the declared as well as undeclared built heritage, assessing their condition, and thereby concluding the best method of identifying the built heritage and conserving them. So the methodology was basically a qualitative study, which was based on the data available online, as this research was done during the pandemic. And getting on to the northern Sri Lanka, so as the unsettled situation arose in the northern province since 1956 itself, which was just 8 years since our independence, and then later on the armed conflict started, and that was concluded in 2009. Actually, we did not have the opportunity, and our scholars did not have the access to actually go and conduct the research. And that was that could be one of the major reasons why this part was ignored. And also, even after 2009, it is the same ordinance that was followed in order to record the built heritage. And no post-war or post-conflict concepts were followed. However, even the criteria did not give space in order for us to conduct such research. And also, as we consider the international conventions, only the 1954 Hague Convention addresses a concept or conservation concept of a post-conflict situation, which in its second protocol introduces a new system of enhanced protection for cultural property of the greatest importance for humanity, which must also be protected adequately by the national legislation, which we are lacking, and not used for military purpose or shield military sites we should have been following. And the rest of the conventions do not address a post-conflict situation. Therefore, I'm ignoring, I won't be talking about those for now. And the Declaration of Breston also emphasizes the need for documentation of a heritage, because so basically conservation is not just keeping the building as it is. Conservations, there are different sorts of conservation. You could renovate it, you could propose a reuse pattern, and conservations could be done in several ways. But then prior to deciding on that, the initial step would be to document the built heritage. So considering that, this chapter is actually carried out in order to identify first the built heritage and then to evaluate them, which would lead to carry out the recording process. And prior to like introducing the evaluation results, after listing down the built heritage, I categorized them into different categories. And then the first one is the Jaffna Tamil Kingdom architecture. And of those, we only have two remnants from the Tamil Kingdom. One is the palace entrance building, and the other one is the minister's house. However, those do not, since there's no research that have done, as we observe, there's no authentic architectural style of the kingdom that has been identified. But then they reflect more of the colonial elements. And the other one is the Jaffna temple architecture, which is very interestingly varies from 5th century typical Hindu architecture to colonial structures with its vibrant colors, provides a sense of a Hindu temple. And the other one is the very typical colonial architecture that's reflected in the church buildings, in the clock towers, etc. And the other category is something that is very important, but then we always ignore as we talk about the built heritage. That is the vernacular architecture, which is resembled in the residence buildings and even in the fences. Because it is the residence we always focus on the political history. But then these vernacular buildings reflects the social pattern, the lifestyle of the people. And that is why this is very important to be conserved. And these are the categories that I have summarized. And now getting on to the evaluation. So Jaffna Fort is one of the listed buildings by the Department of Archaeology. But that is as per the Central Cultural Fund and Department of Archaeology, that is the only building that has been systematically researched and conserved. But then that was not done based on our ordinance. It was done because the University of Durham of the UK has funded this project. They have brought in their researchers and conducted this. And the rest of the built heritage are the Sankliyantopu, Old Kacheri building, Mantrimane, etc. These are listed buildings. But then as we could observe, the Sankliyantopu is just at the edge of the road, and there's no physical protection provided for it. And in case a vehicle mishap happens or a vehicle skids the structure and hits the structure could completely collapse. And there's no historic record that has been conducted on this building. And it is the same with Mantrimane, where it is let open, there's no security, and then it's open to public, and then there's so much vandalization that has been happening. And then Nagatipa Purana Viharya, it looks very well maintained, but then I would say there's no historic record that has been done, and this case is worse than the rest because at least they are in their state, but then here it has been overridden. Now we have to go further into it to read the history. So these are examples of the listed building, and we could see the state of them. And there are buildings 100 years old, but then it takes a major place in the history of the northern province. So that is not listed. And Nallur Kandaswamy temple, which is the icon of Jaffna, is not listed. And the rest of the two, as I have discussed before. So now these are the listed buildings, and I have discussed on which are listed and non-listed, and both are very important. And how, so these are what I have obtained through the online data available. So how do we actually define, or what is the best process to identify those, is that I came across this method of prognosis, where you, when there is an old building, you identify them, and then you look at them or assess them in two perspectives. One is the historical, social, and cultural perspective, and the other one is the economic and development perspective. So as Northern Province is a developing area, then in order to decide on the historic importance of it, you follow one field of study, and in order to decide on how it should be conserved, you have another field of study. And this is the method I would propose to assess or identify the built heritage. And my conclusion would be that the observed lack of protection emphasizes the need for initially a national conservation law, which is followed by a law that widens its definition of built heritage in order to include every vital built heritage, followed by incorporating post-armed conflict conservation policy with declaration of every such built heritage as a national asset. Because, can I just take one more minute? So that is because, a successful post-war reconstruction as backbone of peace building could ensure preventing the society from relapse, as our scholar states. And in society where political actions threatens opening of wounds, maybe an amnesia or a widespread amnesia could be accepted. But that is not the case in Sri Lanka. We lack an evident history, and Northern Province, especially after 2009, as we have concluded the armed conflict, it is part of, we consider that as part of Sri Lanka. It is a national asset. Therefore, in order to respect them as a national asset, we should first establish a national conservation policy, including them, considering them as a national asset, and then further from that, develop the post-conflict conservation policy. Thank you.